For more than 60 years, the world has known one Clint Eastwood, the man with no name, the squinting gunslinger who rewrote the Western, Dirty Harry, the tough-as-nails cop who became a cultural icon, the Oscar-winning director, a master storyteller, who commands a set with the same quiet authority he has on screen. Through it all, he's been a symbol of unbreakable, unshakable American masculinity. A man of few words and even fewer emotions. He built a fortress around himself with granite glares and gruff one-liners, and for nearly a century, it seemed like no one could get through. But what if that fortress had a secret door? What if the toughest man in Hollywood has been hiding? A lifelong vulnerability? A secret known only to a few? Now, at 95 years old, looking back on a long and storied life, a question hangs over the legend. Was there one woman whose impact was so profound, so lasting, that the memory of it still brings a flicker of something raw to the surface? A relationship that secretly defined the man behind the myth? This isn't just a story about Clint Eastwood's famous romances. It's an investigation into the one connection that might explain the haunted characters he's played and the emotional distance he's kept. To understand the man, we have to journey back through the life he built on being untouchable and uncover the one relationship that proved he never truly was. For over 60 years, Clint Eastwood has been the face of unbreakable strength. But what if that's all been a carefully crafted image? At 95, looking back, it's clear his life was shaped not just by his iconic roles, but by a series of powerful, tumultuous relationships. We're not just retelling his love life. We're searching for the one woman who got past his defenses and left a permanent mark on the man who seemed immune to everything. Stay with us as we unravel the mystery of the woman who may have been Clint Eastwood's one true vulnerability. Before the squint, the poncho, and the .44 Magnum, there was Clinton Eastwood Jr., a child of the Great Depression, born in San Francisco on May 31, 1930. His family moved around a lot as his dad looked for work. A tough upbringing that taught young Clint to be independent and rely on himself. He was a quiet, shy kid who found escape in music, especially the jazz and bebop sounds that would become a lifelong passion. This wasn't the making of a movie star. It was the making of a survivor. His path to Hollywood was anything but a straight line. He worked a string of odd jobs: lumberjack, steelworker, lifeguard, each one adding to the blue-collar grit that would later make him so believable. A stint in the Army during the Korean War only sharpened his disciplined, no-nonsense attitude. While stationed at Fort Ord in California, he finally caught the eye of a few filmmakers. With his towering height and chiseled looks, he had the raw material of a star. But his early acting attempts were rough. Universal Studios signed him and then dropped him, criticizing his stiff delivery and the way he spoke through his teeth. It was in these early, lean years that the Eastwood persona was born. He wasn't an overnight success, he was a grinder, a man who learned his craft on the dusty sets of B-movies and early TV. His big break as Rowdy Yates in the TV Western Rawhide gave him his first taste of fame but also boxed him in. He was the dependable sidekick, the handsome but forgettable cowboy. Inside, though, a quiet ambition was burning. He was watching, learning, and waiting for his chance to break the mold. That chance came from a cheap Italian Western led by a director named Sergio Leone. The film was A Fistful of Dollars. Eastwood famously stripped down the dialogue, creating a character defined by action, not words. He turned his so-called weaknesses, his stoicism, his minimalist style, into his greatest strengths. The man with no name was born, and with him, a new kind of movie star. He wasn't a clean-cut hero like John Wayne. He was cynical, morally gray, and deadly efficient. He was an enigma, and people were hooked. The fortress of Clint Eastwood, the public icon, was now built. He was cool, detached, and always in control. It was an image that sold millions of movie tickets, but it also hid an increasingly messy private life that had started with a solemn vow years earlier. Long before the affairs and scandals hit the papers, Clint Eastwood was a husband. He met Margaret Maggie Johnson on a blind date in May 1953. She was a student at UC Berkeley, and he was a 23-year-old aspiring actor with not much more than ambition. They got married just a few months later, in December 1953. For over 30 years, Maggie Johnson was the one constant in a life that was changing at lightning speed. Their marriage, which lasted until 1984, was the foundation his empire was built on, and you could argue it was the first and biggest casualty of his fame. In the early years, they were just another young couple. Photos show a smiling, relaxed Eastwood, a man not yet carrying the weight of his future persona. They lived in a small Hollywood apartment, and Maggie worked to support them while Clint chased auditions. She was there before the fame, the money, and the legend. She was the one who believed in him when studio execs told him he didn't have what it takes. That shared history, that period of struggle, creates a bond that's hard to break. But the marriage was on shaky ground from the start. Even while they were engaged, Eastwood began a pattern of cheating that would define their relationship. He had an affair with a woman in Seattle that resulted in a daughter, Lori, born in 1954, whom he wouldn't acknowledge for decades. It was the first of many secrets. As his star rose with Rawhide in the late 50s, the temptations of Hollywood multiplied. He was on the road, surrounded by adoring fans, and he didn't say no. His most serious affair was with a stunt woman named Roxanne Tunis, who he met on the set of Rawhide. This wasn't just a fling. It was a relationship that reportedly lasted 14 years and produced another daughter, Kimber, in 1964. He was essentially living a double life. For years, Kimber's existence was kept a secret. Through it all, Maggie Johnson stayed. Some have described their marriage as open, but you have to wonder about the private pain and silent deals that defined her life. She put up with the whispers and the long absences, raising their two children, Kyle, born in 1968, and Allison, born in 1972, mostly on her own, while her husband became one of the biggest stars in the world. She provided the stable home, the image of normalcy that gave him the freedom to build his legend. So, could Maggie be the one? Could she be the one who could do that to him, endure, anchor him, and be the keeper of a home he knew he could always come back to? Their legal separation didn't happen until 1978, long after he'd started another life-changing relationship. The final divorce in 1984 came with a reported settlement between $20 and $25 million, a huge sum at the time and a testament to the 30 years she'd invested in him. She was the first, the longest, and the woman who knew him before the myth. For that alone, she's a powerful candidate. If Maggie Johnson was Clint Eastwood's anchor, then actress Sandra Locke was the storm. Their relationship, which kicked off in 1975, was a whirlwind of passion, creativity, and eventually incredible bitterness. It was a partnership that played out on and off screen, leaving a permanent mark on his career and, by all accounts, his soul. For many, Sandra Locke is the only person who could have left that kind of scar. They met when she auditioned for his film Breezy in 1972. Locke didn't get the part, but she made an impression. 3 years later, they were cast together in The Outlaw Josie Wales, and the spark was instant. At the time, Eastwood was still married to Maggie Johnson, and Locke was in a platonic marriage with her gay best friend, Gordon Anderson. But those were just technicalities. For over a decade, they were inseparable. They lived together and made a string of hit movies, including The Gauntlet, Every Which Way But Loose, and Sudden Impact. Their chemistry on screen was electric because it was real. Locke wasn't just a co-star, she was a creative partner. She wasn't happy to stand in his shadow. She challenged him, matched his intensity, and had a fierce intelligence he was clearly drawn to. In her autobiography, The Good, the Bad, and the Very Ugly, Locke painted a picture of a man completely in love. But behind the scenes, the dream was turning into a nightmare. Locke alleged that Eastwood pushed her to have 2 abortions and then a procedure to prevent pregnancy, claiming he didn't want more kids. Eastwood denied it. But the truth was more complicated. While he was living with Locke, Eastwood secretly fathered 2 children with a flight attendant named Jocelyn Reeves, a son, Scott, born in 1986, and a daughter, Catherine, born in 1988. Locke and the public were kept in the dark for years. When they finally broke up in 1989, it was an explosion. According to Locke, it was brutal. She claimed she came home to find he'd changed the locks and had her things put in storage. What came next was one of Hollywood's ugliest and most public legal battles. Locke sued him for palimony. In court, Eastwood notoriously downplayed their decade together, at one point calling her a part-time roommate. They eventually settled. As part of the deal, Eastwood set up a $1.5 million development deal for Locke at Warner Brothers. But after the studio rejected every single project she pitched, she became convinced the deal was a sham to get her to drop the lawsuit. So she sued him again, this time for fraud. This second lawsuit was even more stunning. The jury was apparently siding with Locke before Eastwood decided to settle for an undisclosed amount. So what could Sandra Locke do to him that no one else could? She matched his fire. She inspired a period of incredible creativity. And most importantly, she was the one who stood up to him in court and won. She challenged his power, exposed his weaknesses, and refused to be erased from his story. The wound she left wasn't just about a breakup. It was a blow to his control, his image, and maybe his heart. For a man who lived life on his own terms, Sandra Locke was the one person who proved she could fight back on hers. After the messy and public implosion with Sandra Locke and a relationship with actress Frances Fisher that produced his daughter, Francesca, in 1993, Clint Eastwood seemed to find a calmer harbor in Dina Ruiz. If Maggie was the anchor and Sandra was the storm, Dina was a chance at a more normal family life in his later years. Their relationship started not on a movie set, but in a TV studio in 1993, when Ruiz, a news anchor 35 years younger than him, interviewed him. The dynamic was different right away. Eastwood was now a living legend, a 2-time Oscar winner for Unforgiven. Ruiz was a smart, professional journalist who didn't seem starstruck. They married in 1996, and later that year their daughter Morgan was born. For almost 2 decades, their life in Carmel, California seemed picture-perfect and surprisingly normal. They raised their daughter away from the Hollywood circus, and by all accounts, Eastwood loved being an older father. Dina brought a new energy into his life. She was modern and full of life, and for a long time the age gap didn't seem to matter. But it was that very modernity that reportedly led to their marriage's end. In 2012, Dina starred in a reality TV show for E! Called Mrs. Eastwood and Company. The show followed her, their daughter Morgan, and a singing group she managed. Clint only appeared briefly and was reportedly furious about the whole thing, feeling it was a total invasion of the privacy he'd guarded his entire life. That clash of worlds, his intensely private, hers increasingly public, was too much. They separated, and their divorce was finalized in 2014, ending a 17-year marriage. The split was public and painful. Dina spoke openly about her heartbreak, but was careful to say Clint himself had been lovely through it all. It's a less dramatic theory, but still a powerful one. Maybe Dina was the one who could do that to him by bringing the 21st century world of reality TV crashing into his private life, dismantling the quiet family sanctuary he had built with her. For a man like Eastwood, losing a family structure in his 80s over something he couldn't understand or control could have been a uniquely painful blow. As the dust settled from 2 divorces and countless relationships, Clint Eastwood did what he always does. He went back to work. His personal life once again took a back seat to his professional drive. He's continued to direct and act well into his 90s, helming films like The Mule, Cry Macho, and the legal thriller Juror, Je suis one. This relentless creativity is a huge part of his legacy. He is still one of the most vital filmmakers of his generation, an icon who refuses to just fade away. The women in his life weren't just side notes. They were central to his journey. Think of the lonely, haunted men he so often played. From vengeful cowboys to regretful old men, his characters are often grappling with loss, past mistakes, and a connection they just can't hold on to. The raw emotion in films like Unforgiven or $1 Million Baby feels even deeper when you see it through the lens of a man who experienced so much love and heartbreak. The epic romance and loss in The Bridges of Madison County hits differently when you know he lived through great passions that didn't last. In his later years, he remained unmarried after his divorce from Dina. He was in a long-term relationship with Christina Sandra, which began in 2014. His legacy is a fascinating split. There's the public icon, the strong, silent hero, the tough-as-nails artist. And then there's the private man, a figure whose life was a complex web of intense love, cheating, secret children, and bitter legal fights. The pain, the passion, the regret. These aren't just plot points in his movies. They are the ghosts of his life, the emotional landscape that shaped the artist and the man. So after looking at the monumental relationships that defined Clint Eastwood's life, we come back to the main question. Who was the one woman who could truly get to him? While Maggie Johnson's endurance was incredible and his split from Dina Ruiz was a true late-life heartbreak, the sheer, scorched earth intensity of his time with Sandra Locke makes her the most compelling answer. She seems to be the only one who held a unique power over him, a power to challenge, match, and ultimately shatter his legendary defenses in a way no one else ever could. She was the one whose ambition and talent mirrored his own, creating a partnership of creative equals. And most importantly, she was the only one who refused to be silenced. When their love affair crashed and burned, she didn't just disappear. She took him on in the public arena of the courts and held him accountable. Doing that to him was about making the man who was always in control lose it. She saw through the myth of Clint Eastwood to the flawed, emotional man underneath, and she wasn't scared by what she saw. The aftermath, the lawsuits, the public humiliation, the accusations, wasn't just a breakup. It was a war, and it likely left a scar so deep that he still carries it. It wasn't just about lost love. It was about a loss of power, a loss of invincibility. Sandra Locke was the one who could hold up a mirror and force him to see a side of himself he wasn't comfortable with. For a man like Clint Eastwood, that's something you never forget. In the end, the image of Clint Eastwood at 95, a man still creating but also shaped by a lifetime of complicated love, adds the final, most human chapter to his story. For decades, he was the master of the unspoken. It's fitting, then, that the most revealing parts of his life aren't found in interviews, but in the wreckage of his most passionate relationship. Knowing there was one woman, one force of nature, who could get through his fortress of solitude, changes how we see him. It reframes the lonely heroes he brought to the screen. Maybe they weren't just characters. Maybe they were reflections of a man who understood their pain. The unbreakable hero was, in fact, broken. The unshakable man was shaken to his very core. His legacy is now twofold. He will forever be the icon of American cinema, the man who defined cool for generations. But he will also be the man who reminds us that even the toughest among us have a secret wound that never fully heals. And in that story, Clint Eastwood the myth finally becomes Clint Eastwood the man. Complex, flawed, and haunted by the ghost of a love that proved to be the most powerful force of all. What do you think? Who do you believe was the one woman who had the biggest impact on Clint Eastwood's life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one, and if you want more deep dives into the untold stories of Hollywood's greatest legends, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you found this story compelling. Thanks for watching.